My friends, would you be with me in a moment of prayer? Holy God, I ask you send your blessed Holy Spirit to be with us, to come upon us and dwell with us, inspire us, open our hearts and our minds that we may open our mouths and our hands. And of course, may the same Spirit of love and wisdom guide my words that they might be appropriate and inspiring and comforting with your help, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Thank you. So, I know it's a little old-fashioned to pray before sermons, but I find that's the octane I need to go up. So, thank you. So, some of you may notice the title of my sermon this week, and it is called A New Fyrkantig, and I forgot my hammer. And so, and the design on the front of the bulletin, Jay put that together in the office. He created the whole thing. He was trying to go for a certain vibe. And many of you probably recognize by the name and the design, I'm talking about IKEA, or IKEA if you're European. So it is, a Fyrkantig. I'm sorry for any Swedish speakers. I tried my best. So if you've ever been to IKEA, you know that they have a certain layout and a certain way of doing things. It's so funny because the very first time Patty and I ever went to an IKEA, we didn't follow the path. And we got lost. And we're like, where are we? What is this? And then we finally learned, you follow the path and you get to where you want. So IKEA has actually become one of our favorite places, not only because Swedish heritage is in Patty's family, but also we love the meatballs. And one of the favorite pastimes we have there is we go around. This is I apologize to anyone who's Swedish. We go around saying the names of the different stuff with sort of the Muppet Swedish chef, harka, barka, durka. So, and we just like doing that. So anyway, I was thinking about when we go to IKEA, the assumptions we have. Okay, so you see those beautiful streamlined boxes, but when you open it, there are going to be hundreds of little screws and little pegs that you don't know where they go, and boards and all this stuff. You open it, it ends up all over your floor. And I'm always like thinking, oh my gosh, where's my toolbox? Where's my hammer? And so that was my my inspiration for this sermon was, what are our assumptions about IKEA and things that we face? Okay, so these IKEA names, Fyrkantig, they have real meanings, and if we take time to find out what they mean, it's really a very interesting. There's a website where you can put it in and find out what the names mean, and sometimes that'll help us through our assumptions about what things are, and help us clarify our narratives without hesitation. So we have this story in Genesis, which is very popular. You probably heard it since Sunday school, if that's your tradition. And it's about God promising Abram and Sarah that they will be great parents of a great nation, as plentiful as the sand, as the stars in the sky, if they follow. And so that's a wonderful comfort. That is a wonderful promise. But I want you to dwell in a moment, and this is called imagining Scripture. I want you to really put yourself in the place of Sarah and Abram. And they say they're 99 years old, they're in their 90s. Think about that reality of becoming pregnant. I'm only 60 and the thought exhausts me, and I'm not even capable of bearing a child. And so it makes us laugh, and we think of, oh my gosh, all of the things that make us hesitate. But in this story, we have two very old people given a chance to live in possibility and awe. Now, in the ancient world, it's like the focus of children was your legacy. And if you didn't have children, you were sort of seen as like irrelevant because you weren't passing on the things that were necessary. And it was a really tragic way to live, where people were discarded. And if you didn't have children, you were discarded. If you were a widow, you were discarded. You were put on the outside. But this, God is giving them a chance of generational relevance, which was everything in the ancient world. And this really fell heavily, like I said, on women. And men considered it their legacy. And there's still some movements where you see, as they put it, a quiverful of children is a blessing to a man. But, in looking at this old way of thinking, it's really, really unjust. And the thought of living in hopelessness, of not being included, it's really very sad. So we see God forming this covenant with Abram and Sarah, that they would not only have children, they would be so numerous you couldn't even count them. And some churches will dwell on how God created the life in a 100-year-old person, and then they'll look at some scientific ways that they can wrangle an explanation because it has to be proven literally true. But that doesn't matter. It's not about the how, it's about the what, it's about the why. You have two people, very well off, but in a place of marginalization. And this is God working in the lives of people who are feeling hopeless, irrelevant. Maybe the possibility of being cursed, you don't know because you don't have children. That was a sign of being cursed. But God comes in and transforms their lives and makes hopelessness awe. God transforms, creates, makes something new. They're called. We're called. You guys have heard me say this till you're probably sick, but can't you perceive it? So, by tradition, then this nation of countless as the stars are usually people of the book, the children of Abraham and Sarah. But beyond all that, God calls to everyone, all children, no matter who they are or where they are on life's journey. They're called. Come, follow, transform, create, and you will be transformed. This saying, yes, this is a life of awe. And it transformed Sarai into Sarah. So she becomes, Sarah means like princess, so she becomes sort of a wife of status to Sarah, the mother of nations, queen of nations, widening her spheres. Same thing with Abram. Abram is sort of like great God, great father leader, and it widens to that he is the parent of nations. Okay, so it's widening these spheres, moving from sort of tribal to universal. So this story with Sarah and Abraham is an invitation to live in the awe, despite the absurdity, besides the assumptions, besides the possible pain. I mean, imagine 99 giving birth. Wow. So, we turn to the gospel. In that, we hear Jesus giving some ominous realities to his followers. And what I love is he tells them, don't tell anyone. Okay, I'm going to tell you this awful stuff, but don't tell anyone. And he's talking about the journey that he's on and what may be ahead for them. Now, Peter, who's always speaking his mind, speaks up. And he's basically saying, no, I hope, no, this shouldn't happen. Stop me. He's great. And in the Message version, he's kind of like grabbing him, trying to hold him back. But Jesus responds to Peter, and it's a pretty harsh way. Sometimes it's called a rebuke. But what he does is he's confronting Peter because he's responding. I think he's responding in a way that I would respond. I'm sure you think about it, many of you would respond. If someone's giving horrible news and saying, we're going to go on a trip, and during that trip there's going to be a terrible, terrible situation, and we're going to be thrown in jail, and some of you might have to spend their life there, and I might get the death penalty. You say, oh, goody. No. You say, no, what are you talking about? Please, no, I don't know. But we're sort of pre-programmed as human beings to sort of take the easy route, to take the route that doesn't challenge. Because maybe in that story about the horrible situation, maybe in that moment of chaos and sacrifice, a whole town is saved. Maybe something spectacular happens and people who've been oppressed are now liberated. What is the context of that story? So, we pre-programmed humans are sitting there saying, no, I don't want to do the hard stuff, please. And where do those thoughts come from? The ones to kind of want to take the road of self-preservation and comfort, the one where you actually have people valeting you into the places you need to go. Who could break that road? Who could it be? Let me think. Could it be Satan? I'm sorry. That's my bad impersonation of the church lady from 30 years ago. But anyway, we hear Jesus telling Peter, get behind me, Satan. And he's just basically telling him, don't be putting up these roadblocks, because Satan is sort of the adversary, somebody who's putting up those questions that sometimes you need to consider. But Satan then becomes the reason. I can't do this because of that. Then there's also another word, diabolos, who is sort of the confuser or the slanderer who likes to confuse things through lies. So what Jesus is saying is, get that out of the way. Get that out of the way. If we're going to go where we need to go, we need to be clear and ready for what's going to happen. We don't need all the twists and lies. And sometimes this road, the road of Satan, is a road of self-serving interests. And the path Jesus is calling is the path of selflessness and love, path to new life at the expense of comfort. And so last week, we were hearing stories about taking up crosses and moving forward. And I think of the world that we live in now, and often the idea of the cross is something imposed. Jesus says, take up your cross. He doesn't say, go impose your cross on someone else. And that is important. The cross is not imposed. Yes, Jesus was condemned to the cross, but he took it up. It frustrates me sometimes because right now there are huge movements on how to impose the cross. You've heard in my theology, this cross represents community and intimate connection with God, joined together in spirit, prayer, advocacy, movement. And these are wonderful things. But if you really think of being connected with God, being connected with community, being connected with real movement, real change, that's hard. Sometimes you might be made fun of. Sometimes it's crushing. Sometimes it's fear-inducing or life-draining. But Jesus reminds us that though this is scary, put those things behind. Don't freeze in the anticipation of what's hard, but move together in hope. Now, to be clear, this year has started with a lot of personal challenges for me with the loss of my mom. It's been 35 years since I've really visited these sorts of feelings of loss. My dad passed in 1986. And the way life is, it's inevitable, and the time came, and I'm trying to live into the reality of that. The first time I was in my 20s, and it's so funny because the reality now, the relationships are different. The people I'm working with that are encountering me are different. The people who are supporting me are different. Everything has changed. The sense of loss is still dramatic, and if people say, well, you're going to lose your father, your mother, you're going to say, no. But it's inevitable. This harshness is inevitable, and I know many of you are bearing your own burdens, your own losses, your own challenges. But it's not that we dwell in that. It's how we share it, how we uplift it within community and with connection with God. There's a way forward. We are not frozen. I was not frozen in the death of my father, in the mind of a 20-year-old, and I'm not frozen right now with the death of my mother, now that I'm a 60-year-old. Changes. God unfolds. My understanding of divinity and life have changed so much. So much. So if we think about our complicated world, all of these challenges, all of these hopeless things, look at worldviews that permit unjust invasions, excessive forces of war, killing of families and children, murder of dissidents, twisting of words that make words that originate from struggle and oppression, like woke, turning into meaningless catchphrases, deliberate lies, excessive influences of money, indifference, cynicism, the confusion of fame and infamy. These are all similar to the corrupt practices and empire building that Jesus knew, and that he was called to face down. Caesar's way or God's way. The use of religious practice to oppress, or the use of religious practice to raise. Misinterpretation of God's law to create oppression. Speaking with the authority of God's voice. Yeah, I know God's voice. I know God's law. That's one reason, like I said, that I really love the UCC. Not only is it all about you, I am not God's voice. You can listen to this and say, you know what, John, you're full of gefernte flicker. You know, it's how God talks to you and how the Spirit moves you. It's love. It's whoever is working in the way of love is working with God, working in creation, working with the new thing. Can't we perceive it? If there was ever a time to live in those words that we heard, and I'm going to use more old-fashioned words, but what is it to gain the whole world and lose your soul? Think of all the people in our culture, in our lives, maybe even ourselves, who have fallen into that trap, trying to gain the whole world but lose our soul. These things sometimes keep me up at night, thinking of the possibility of the world, of cruelty, relentless power grabs, my getting older, my health, my changing family dynamics, my role in some of these disorders. It can pull me down. But just as Jesus warns Peter, this isn't the way forward. That's the way backwards. It's the way of becoming static. It's the way of becoming sculpture or an institution. Yes, there are many beautiful statues, and as I studied art history, I love some of these beautiful sculptures, but inevitably something happens. They break, they shatter, they disappear. Think of the Colossus of Rhodes. That was a huge statue. Totally disappeared. They're beautiful, but ultimately they are lifeless. That's why Jesus calls us to life, not to being static, not to being still. It's the path of life. So, my friends, today as we hear the gospel, let's not dwell in fear, but move in hope, move in awe. That's a word I started learning at Advent this year. It's not about waiting, it's about awe. And now we're in the instruction manual of Lent. It's not about beating up yourself. There is a turning around, but it's done in awe. It's hard. It's hard. But Jesus says, I am with you. And we know we have each other. So let's see where this journey to Easter takes us. No, let's not be afraid of the complexity of IKEA products, fearful of all the little screws and knobs and little wooden things. Let's not be afraid that we don't have our hammers. Because the reality is sometimes fear is deceiving. Many times IKEA products just need a screwdriver or this universal tool that comes with it. Of course, they have their instructions. I have to look at how you say it. Fyrkantig. The Fyrkantig is a type of glass candle holder. It means square. And the candles that go with it are also Fyrkantig. Isn't it funny that they would have been destroyed if I had my hammer? Good thing I overcame my fear. May you be blessed to these understanding and Next time you go to IKEA, maybe you can buy a Fyrkantig.